Okay, welcome to my primers, setting sprays, and powders. These are going to be some of the quickest categories for me to go through and declutter because they are actually quite small categories in my collection. And looking at it, I don't think we're going to be letting go of much. But let's go through everything one by one. I'll chat to you a little bit about it, and then we'll decide whether or not it needs to stay or go. Let's start first with the primers. These are the 4 primers that are currently in my collection. So I started the year with 6 primers. I decluttered one at the beginning of the year. I used up 3 primers, and then I acquired 1 new primer, and that's this one here. I'm mostly happy with what I have here in terms of primers. So let's talk about the Cover FX first. So this is a little mini of the Cover FX gripping primer. I once upon a time went through a full size of this. Really enjoyed it. I do feel like it helps with the longevity of my foundation. It does not help at all with oil production, so that's not really something that I use it for. But if I'm going to be using a foundation that doesn't really have the staying power that I'm looking for, this in conjunction with a good setting spray can really be helpful. Next, I have the Rimmel Stay Matte Makeup Primer. This is the second tube of this that I have gone through. This is a really nice mattifying primer from the drugstore that's also very affordable. It is not my absolute number 1 mattifying primer. That would be the Danessa Myricks Blurring Balm in the shade Universal. I completed that one this year, and then decided that I would try to use this one up before repurchasing the Danessa Myricks. So I have been working on this for a good part of the year. I thought I would be done with it by now. However, the last couple of months of our warm weather, I really was not wearing a whole lot of makeup at all. And the warmer months are really when a mattifying primer is the most useful for me, because when things start to get colder, my skin in the current climate I'm in becomes much more normal and sometimes verging on dry. And so I don't have as much use for this during the fall and winter. I actually made some good progress on this. Yeah, look at that. If I squeeze all the air out, oh my gosh, we're almost there. But yeah, I don't see myself, this was in my 24 and 24, but I really don't see myself completing it until next summer when I have more need of an oil controlling primer. Now, these are the 2 that I'm not sure about. This Mally Face Defender was it was the purchase that I made this year. And I picked it up because I remembered, it's this clear jelly-like balm. I remember, who was it? Emily Noel going on and on about this product and how great it was as a touch-up product. Now, it started to get a little bit grody because I did use it a few times as a touch-up product, which meant I was applying it over existing makeup, and that traces of that have ended up in the pan, which is a little bit unattractive, to be honest. Not the most delightful thing to look at. But after using this a couple times as a touch-up product, I discovered that I think I prefer it more as a primer. However, I haven't had a ton of opportunities to test it really thoroughly because I accidentally shelved it with my smaller eyeshadow palettes, with my quads. This is about the size of a Pat McGrath quad. I have several of those, and I accidentally shelved these with those and just completely forgot it existed. So I am glad I have rediscovered this. I don't know that I love this product yet. I just need to experiment a little bit more with it before I decide whether or not I need to keep it in my collection. And last, this is my e.l.f. Poreless Putty Primer. I know that this is a primer so many people have loved. I have used a fair amount of this, and I feel like it never quite did what I wanted it to do, which is blur my pores beneath makeup. And I have just come to the conclusion, I just personally don't feel like any primer I have ever used for that purpose has ever really made that much of a difference. I will see an immediate result on my skin when applying the primer, but as soon as I put anything over the primer, I just really don't see a difference. I pulled this into a project a few months ago, and so started using it a little bit more just to see if I could find a way to make it work, because I know so many people love this primer. And I did a kind of like a split face test where I wore it on half of my face, and I just didn't see any difference in my pores. And I actually found that this made me a little shinier by the end of the day, which is usually not something that I'm looking for. However, now that we are in the middle of wintertime and I am starting to experience a little bit of dryness in certain areas, particularly around my mouth, I'm going to give this another try to see if the more emollient nature of this will work in my favor. So the thing that I wasn't loving about it during the summertime was that it was making me a little too glowy, but that might be just the amount of glow that I need in those areas that are a little bit more dry for me. So this might end up being a declutter after all, but I want to use it a few more times just to see if it can be more useful to me during the winter than it is during the rest of the year. So no declutters for my primers, at least not yet. Okay. And similar with my setting sprays, there is a setting spray that I don't have here. I don't know what happened to it. I traveled with it last month. And I think that's the reason why I can't find it. I came home in a hurry from a trip, unpacked, repacked, then left again. And somewhere in the shuffle, I misplaced my Urban Decay All-Nighter setting spray. I just have a little mini of it that is almost done. I have no intention of decluttering that, so I will eventually find it. I will use it up. I really, really enjoy that setting spray. It is very reliable. It is a little bit more heavy duty than I tend to need on a day-to-day basis. So I usually use something a little bit more lightweight, like the Sephora makeup setting spray, which I don't find, this does not prolong the wear of my makeup as long as the all-nighter, but I usually don't need that kind of longevity. So I keep the all-nighter for events and when I really need my makeup to last 12 hours. That's when I reach for the Urban Decay All-Nighter. So I will be hanging onto that for that purpose. And likewise, I will be hanging onto this Sephora makeup setting spray for the rest of my day-to-day use. I also have this little bottle of the Gerard Slay All Day setting spray in the coconut set, which is delightful. And as you can see, I have so little left in here. I think that's probably one use. I have one use left in there. This, which is spoiler for my 50 Shades of Brown, which this is rolled into. So this one will be complete before the end of the year. This is a jumbo of the Morphe Continuous Setting Mist. I have already gone through a smaller one of these earlier this year. I picked this up at during the Ulta sale last year, in the fall of last year. If I'm using a lot of powder or a heavier, more matte foundation and I'm feeling like I'm looking a little dry, this is lovely for just adding some hydration and helping everything just sort of melt together on my face. I will also use this to wet my brushes. If I need to wet a brush to use a particularly dusty or crumbly eyeshadow or a shimmer that needs a little bit of help to reach its full potential, I will reach for this setting mist. I really, really like this one. I like the continuous nature of it. It's a very fine mist. I just really like it a lot. I've gone through multiples of these and I will almost certainly repurchase another one once this is gone. So no declutters there either. Let's look at powders. I don't have a ton of powders. I actually finished a powder this year, September. In either September or October, I finished the Honest Beauty loose powder, which I love, which leaves me with these ones. So here I have the Makeup Forever Matte Velvet Skin. This is a powder foundation in the shade Y235. This is a really lovely powder foundation. I don't have this in my foundation category simply because that is not the way I have used it recently. I have been using this more to set my makeup when I am using something that could use a little bit more coverage, and that's where this comes in handy for me. But I have enjoyed it in both ways. It's a really, really pretty, creamy, very flattering powder. Really, really have enjoyed this one. So keeping that. This is my Hourglass Ambient Lighting Powder in the shade Dim Light. And to be perfectly honest, I have not reached for this in a while. This is a really lovely, luminous finishing powder that just gives the most beautiful candlelit lumen. Do you see that? It gives the most delightful glow. Now I do find that in the warmer months, I need to stay away from my T-zone with this because when it mixes with my natural oils, it does end up looking a little heavy and it can accentuate the pores in my T-zone a little bit. But on the periphery of my face or during the colder months, this is just a really, really beautiful, beautiful finishing powder. I don't use it enough. I really need to reach for it more. Now this is my current love. Now that I have finished the Honest powder, which I was really working on trying to finish that one this year. Now that that one is done, this is the one that I am reaching for pretty much every time I do my makeup. This is the One Size Ultimate Setting Powder in the shade Ultra Pink. Is it Ultra Pink? Can't remember. Yes, Ultra Pink. That is the shade. I just really, really love this powder, and I really do love the pink shade as well. I have a neutral to cool undertone, and I kind of feel like the pink powder does for me what a banana powder does for people with warmer skin tones. This is unusual in that I like it on my face and under my eyes. Generally speaking, I will need a lighter weight powder for underneath my eyes because I am of the age where anything too heavy under the eyes really becomes very obvious. But usually the things that are lightweight enough to go under my eyes aren't substantial enough to really set down the rest of my face, especially during the summertime. But this one performs both tasks beautifully. I love it under the eyes. I love it all over the face. I love it through the T-zone. It's not quite as mattifying as my Honest powder was. I have never found a powder as mattifying as that Honest Beauty loose powder. But except for like the very, very hottest part of the summer where everything's melting off of my face, this one works just fine. Really, really enjoy this powder. And then I have here, this is the IT Cosmetics, let's see, Bye Bye Pores Poreless Finish Airbrush Powder in the shade Translucent. This was my absolute, as far as like super mattifying and blurring powders, this was my absolute favorite until I found the Honest Beauty loose powder. And this is my second container of this. This is a repurchase. This kind of got cast to the side as soon as I discovered the Honest powder because I feel like it does everything this powder does. Just does it a little bit better for a little less money. And I mean, I can't argue with that. However, it is still a really, really very nice powder, incredibly finely milled. It is very blurring. It is very mattifying. I don't feel like it keeps me matte quite as long as the Honest does. But now that I am finished with the Honest powder, I'm probably going to go ahead and pick this back up next summer. It's quite a bit more mattifying than I really need in the colder months. So I'm probably going to stick with the One Size until the weather starts to warm up again next year. And then I will bust this out and see if I can get through this one before I permit myself to repurchase the Honest powder. But I don't think I will be purchasing this one again, just because that Honest powder just really does everything that I need a blurring and mattifying powder to do. So we're hanging on to this one, but that will not be a repurchase. Next, I have some under eye setting powders. Now these are powders that don't really do it for me for actually setting the face, but they are lightweight enough to go under the eyes. First, I have a little mini of the Charlotte Tilbury. This is her, I don't know what it's called, her airbrush setting powder, finishing powder. I can't remember. But anyway, this is in shade 1. It's nice and brightening. It is very, very creamy and finely milled. It is one of the few under eye powders that I feel like does not make me look 10 years older than I am. Really like this one. I also have the NARS. Let's see. This is the Translucent Crystal Light Reflecting Setting Powder. And this one was interesting because you can actually see some shimmer in this, in the pan. Similar to does anybody remember that old e.l.f. under eye setting powder that had the sparkle in it? There were a lot of people that swore by that powder. And according to them, the sparkle didn't show up. And it's the same with this one. It does not translate onto the skin. This is a beautiful lightweight setting powder. I do find the two of these to be very comparable. I couldn't tell you which one I prefer. I think this one is a little bit more lightweight, but they're both very flattering under the eyes. And I'm going to hang on to both of them. Now this is the Laura Mercier Secret Blurring Powder for Under Eyes in the shade 2. As you can see here, it is quite a bit deeper than these other two powders. And this does not really give me any brightening, even in the summertime. It is too deep to really brighten that area at all, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not always looking for a very bright under eye. However, despite the fact that I can make the depth of this work during the summertime, it is just too warm. It's just too yellow. And that makes it look very obvious when it is just underneath my eyes. So loath as I am to part with this, I'm going to go ahead and have to declutter this one. So we've got one declutter. Yay! The rest of these, I am just so happy with all of these products. Okay, with the exception of these two are still kind of under consideration. I'm trying to find a way to make this work, and I just need to use this a little bit more to really form an opinion. But the rest of these are all things that I really, really enjoy, and that's what I want to see in my makeup collection. I want to open my drawer and see nothing but things that I love. And this is a good representation of that. Okay, that was a very mini declutter. I'm not terribly surprised though, because those are some of my smallest categories. They don't tend to be categories where I tend to over purchase or do a ton of experimentation. I don't think I've actually purchased any setting sprays, primers, or powders in over a year. So it makes sense to me that I'm not going to have a whole lot of excess that I feel the need to unload. However, concealers may be a different story. So let's take a look at my concealers and see what we can do. Okay, there is one that I have written in my book that I don't have here. I think I may have decluttered it to a friend earlier this year and then just failed to write it down. I'm terrible about that. I'm trying to get better about notating down what I have passed on to other people. So these are my concealers. I do also have up here a few little correctors, like under eye correctors. And I do think we should be able to whittle this down a little bit. So there's 3 things I have here that are still in the packaging. This is just a little mini of the It Cosmetics Bye Bye Under Eye in the shade medium. I picked this up after pretty much completing the medium shade in my It Cosmetics It Girl face palette that had all 3 of these, and I ended up really, really enjoying the medium shade. So I picked one of these up. However, before I got around to busting into it, I discovered the Huda Beauty, which became an instant hit and my absolute favorite. And since then, I haven't gotten to this. So I'm not sure if I'm going to hang on to this. I think I'm going to hang on to it for now. But if I'm not able to bust into it by the time my next declutter rolls around, I may pass this on to someone else. I also have, this is the Pat McGrath Skin Fetish Sublime Perfection Concealer. This is in the shade LM11. I picked this up at Marshall's a while back just because it was a Pat McGrath concealer. I've always wanted to try her concealer, and it popped up in Marshall's for $15, and I just couldn't say no. I am a little bit of a sucker for Pat McGrath, pretty much anything, and it does pop up pretty regularly in TJ Maxx and Marshall's where I am, and so that tends to be where I get most of my products from Pat McGrath. So I picked this up, but I had enough concealers open at the time that I didn't want to bust into it just yet, so we're kind of in the same situation here. And then just because I needed to compound my mistakes, just this last Black Friday / Cyber Monday, there was a sale at Ulta. There was a coupon, plus I had a credit. And so I actually broke down and picked up this concealer that I have been tempted to purchase all year. And I have held off until now. This is the Natasha Denona High Glam Concealer in the shade R5. This is a pretty decent shade for me. However, again, because I am working so hard on finishing a couple of these other things, I'm going to keep it in the box for now. Hopefully I'll be able to open it up sooner than I've been able to get to these ones. But for now, we're just going to keep those ones to the side and hopefully be able to get to them. All right, so my current favorite is the Huda Beauty Faux Filter Concealer. I have it here in the shade 2.7N, which is very much a winter shade for me. So I did not use this much during the summer. It's a little bit too highlighting for me during the summertime, but I've started picking it up again. Now I bought this. I actually thought I had bought it longer ago, but no, I looked it up and I picked this up a year ago in November. So a year ago last month. And for the longest time, I could not determine my progress at all. There was no windowing. You can see, I don't know if you can see here, but we're starting to get some windowing. And if you look straight down the center of the bottle, you can see a little bit of daylight down there. How exciting is that? So I'm getting real close to the end. And I can also tell that I'm getting close to the end because this has always been a very kind of thin, liquidy, serum-like concealer that is just very, very thin on the skin. I just really, really enjoy it. I feel like it doesn't in any way enhance any texture underneath my eyes. However, just in the last few weeks, I've noticed that the consistency of what's left here in the tube has become quite a bit thicker, and I'm having a harder time making it work underneath my eyes. It's still fine on the rest of my face, although it is still a little bit light for me, but it is starting to look a little thicker and heavier on the under eyes. So I do think I'm going to have to consider this one done here pretty soon. Now this is one I think I can let go. This is the e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer in the shade Medium Sand. And this is a good all over the face concealer for me. And it's decent underneath the eyes. I did not like the original e.l.f. Camo Concealer. I felt like it was too drying. I felt like it was very much like the Tarte Shape Tape in that I felt like it gave me texture under my eyes that I didn't know that I had before. That's how I felt about the Shape Tape. That's also how I felt about the original e.l.f. Camo Concealer. This one I like much more. However, while I do like this more, I don't like it anywhere near as much as I like a couple of these other products. And so I just am not reaching for it any longer. I feel like this has had its day. I used about half of this tube and I think it is time to let it go. Here is another one that I feel like had its moment for me. This is the Born This Way Multi-Use Sculpting Concealer. I have this in the shade Light Beige. And this is one that I used more as an all over the face type of concealer, sort of in the place of foundation. Sometimes I would also combine this with my e.l.f. Halo Glow just to boost the coverage of that product. And I felt like it was useful for that purpose. Again, I feel like this had its moment for me and I used the heck out of it, and I'm just not reaching for this any longer. I still feel like it is a good concealer. It is a little bit heavier on my skin than some of the other products that I have here that I definitely prefer. The next one I want to talk about, I have just realized isn't here. Let me go, probably because I used it recently. Okay, let me go find that real quick and I'll be right back. Okay, this is my current favorite concealer. This is the Haus Labs concealer in the shade 24 Light Medium Neutral. This is my current favorite now that the Huda Beauty has kind of changed a little bit in consistency, and so I don't find it quite as versatile on all areas of my face. The two of these are absolutely my top two concealers at the moment. I actually purchased these at I think I purchased this in December of last year, and this one was in November of last year. So I've been working on both of these over the last year, and I have considerably more progress on this one than on this one. There's quite a bit more product left in here. This is the concealer that I used throughout the most of the summertime because it is a bit deeper than the Huda. So I don't have to worry about possibly ending up with kind of a reverse raccoon eye situation under my eyes with this one. This one is beautiful all over the face. I actually picked it up specifically for spot concealing on the face, but I ended up really liking it under the eyes as well. It is a beautiful concealer. I am absolutely hanging on to this one. I don't know if I'm going to end up being able to repurchase any of these, just given what I have waiting in the wings here, but definitely top two right here are the Huda and the Haus Labs. One that actually quite reminds me of the Haus Labs is this one. This was given to me as a gift. This is the Clinique Even Better All Over Concealer in the shade. I have CN40 Cream something. I can't read that last word there. This actually very, very much, it's got a little sponge on the top, which I have attempted to use a couple of times, but it's really not my favorite. I don't prefer that type of tool. Much rather just use my fingers. This definitely, just in the consistency of it and the finish on the skin and the fact that it's very lightweight but has really solid coverage, it very, very much reminds me of the Haus Labs. I do think that Haus Labs edges out the Clinique just a little bit, but it is close enough to the Haus Labs, and the Haus Labs being one of my favorite concealers, I'm going to go ahead and hang on to this as well. This is the Sephora Best Skin Ever Full Coverage Multi-Use Concealer. This is in the shade 22.5N. This is a perfectly nice concealer. It is, I have no complaints. I feel very much the same way about this concealer as I do the accompanying foundation that I decluttered in my foundation declutter video. It is good. It's just not a favorite. And because I have so many favorites, I'm just not reaching for this. And because of that, I think I'm going to go ahead and pass this one on. So this is an interesting one. This is the Wet n Wild Meglast Incognito concealer. This is in the shade, let's see, Fair. This is in the shade Fair, which is obviously too light for me. Even in the wintertime, this is significantly too light for me. And I actually use this as a matte liquid highlighter, and I really enjoy it for that particular purpose. Of course, that means I'm only using a tiny bit at a time. This is a little bit older in my collection. However, it still smells good. It still performs well. It still looks fine in the tube. And so I'm going to hang on to this a little while longer. I actually had a few Wet n Wild concealers last year, and I ended up going through like a little head-to-head with them where I wore one on one side of my face and then I wore another one on another side of the face, and this one was the clear winner. It didn't end up looking crusty or crepey or settling into lines. This is actually a really very nice concealer. I'm not really using it for coverage purposes. I'm just using it for the brightening aspect of it, but it does that job really well without adding too much visible extra product on my face, and I appreciate that. So I'm going to go ahead and hang on to this one as well. Now let's take a look at my under eye correctors. So I have this one. This is the Pixi by Petra. It's in the shade Brightening Peach. I don't know, are there any other shades of this? I don't think I've ever seen anyone use a different shade of this particular product. Is this the only shade? Seems a little bit of a shame if that is the case, because this is a really lovely product. You can see I have hit jar there at the bottom. I don't know if you can see that, but I actually rolled this into I think it was my throwback 30, and with the intent to use this whole thing up. This is a very, very nice under eye corrector. I have no complaints. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and hang on to this one. Now this is the Becca Under Eye Brightening Corrector. This is in the shade Fair Light. And this is the Smashbox packaging. I'm kind of annoyed by the packaging. I don't know how much the packaging changed from the original product back when Becca was its own brand, but this is really kind of obnoxious that just the rose gold on this just scratches right off. That's really pretty annoying, especially given the fact that this was not an inexpensive product. I really wanted to like this. I know so many people who love this product, and theoretically it seemed kind of right up my alley. I do sometimes like to use very lightweight, just barely there makeup, and I kind of feel like if I'm wearing, for instance, like a skin tint or a really sheer balm, or maybe on those days that I'm just wearing the e.l.f. Halo Glow, I will sometimes want a little bit of brightening in the under eye area. But I have found that if I use one of my full coverage concealers, sometimes that can just look a little bit out of place on the rest of my face that has so little coverage, if that makes sense. So I was hoping that this would fill that gap for me, but I just think the anatomy of my face is wrong for this. It is extremely hydrating. It doesn't have a ton of coverage, which I don't mind because that was kind of the point in purchasing it, but it's also incredibly light reflective. I don't have a lot of darkness under the eyes, and I don't have a whole lot of hollowing under my eyes either, but what I do have is kind of some genetic puffiness under the eyes. I have some bags under there. They're not terribly noticeable, but I feel like when I put this on underneath my eyes, they become much more noticeable than they were before, just because of the way the light reflects off of my under eye area. And because of that, it just does not work for me. So I have a friend in mind who I think will enjoy this much more than I have. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to her. The last one that I have here is the Charlotte Tilbury. This is her under eye corrector. It's in the shade 2. Let's see if I can open it. There we go. Now this is along the same lines as the Pixi. This is a slightly deeper shade, I think, than the Pixi is. And it is a little bit thinner and more highly pigmented than the Pixi one is. I do feel like the Pixi is quite a bit thicker and creamier, where this one is very thin. very, very thin, and you can get a super, super lightweight layer of this product under your eyes. I actually really, really enjoy this. I know that these both serve the same purpose, but I enjoy both of them so much, I'm going to keep them both. So that means I'm keeping 9 products, and I'm decluttering 4. Obviously still not the most cutthroat declutter, but again, I don't have a massive collection of these types of products, so I'm actually pretty satisfied with these numbers. And hopefully I'll be able to get this down a little bit further and actually be able to open some of these packages. Wish me luck. That is everything I have for you today. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.